streets. He had a problem with religious people. How can I help anybody when when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. As always, we're excited to have you with us here on Faith in Your Recovery. Welcome to this episode. I'll introduce our guest, Bob Springer, here in a few moments. But we're excited to have you with us. We just hope we can give you that one piece of information, or maybe multiple pieces, that's going to help you move to the next level, help you become the person God has created you to be. We'd appreciate it if you'd like, subscribe. We've got our QR code up. Feel free, if it's, of your heart and your spirit and your style, go ahead and invest in us so we can reach more. Again, thanks for tuning in. Welcome, Bob. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, we're looking forward to what you have to say. I've done a lot of reading. I've listened to many of your interviews. I've got friends who are friends of yours. I think it's our first opportunity to meet, but what we've been able to share here interests me a lot. Thank you for the long drive to be a part of this, and we welcome what you have to share with us. So let's just kind of go back to your beginning. Tell us how the I guess we're going to start with the addiction. How did that come about? When was that in your life? What was it like? Tell us whatever you want us to know, please.
Okay, so I'm from Elkhart County. I was born into a dysfunctional home. My father was an alcoholic. My mom, she struggled with things herself. When I was raised into an environment of drugs and violence. So at a very young age, I gravitated towards violence and drugs. And I just knew when I was a kid that I wanted to be a gangster and a drug dealer.
Now, when you say a kid, what age range are we talking about here? Matters on it doesn't.
So I would say from day one, like my role models growing up were all drug dealers. They were just gang members. So I would say from day one, my drug addiction itself started when I was probably 17, 16 years old.
So sophomore, junior year kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say I started smoking weed probably a little bit earlier than that, but I didn't do any hard drugs until I would say probably my junior, senior year.
What led you to those harder drugs? Was it to be a part of the existing gang, whether it was labeled a gang or not, but those who were using to be a part of that group?
So, like I said, when I started off, I was selling drugs. I sold a lot of drugs. And I had gotten caught up. I was going to Goshen High School. I got caught with a pound of weed. And my dad had pulled some strings and got me sent to Columbus, Ohio with my mom. But when I went to Columbus, Ohio, it was an open door. Like, I was allowed to do whatever I wanted to do, and I just started to sell a lot more drugs. And I ended up getting in trouble. I went to prison.
How old were you?
I would say probably 23 when I went to prison the first time. I've done 13 years in prison total. So when I got out of prison, I had got to messing with pain pills. And I fell in love with them. It was something that I took that just cleared my conscience. Like, it didn't matter what bad thing was going on, what good thing was going on. If I took them, I was good. I enjoyed it. From pain pills, moved to heroin. And when I experienced heroin, there was anything that could touch that feeling. It was amazing.
Far more than what the pills had been for you.
Absolutely. Way more intense. I just knew that if I could feel like that the rest of my life, I would be content with it. But what I didn't realize, what was going to come behind the heroin. In the process, before I went to prison the first time, I had a son. And my son, when he was born, me and him was around each other from the day he came home from the hospital until he was 5 years old. My son went absolutely everywhere with me, places he should have never been at. He was involved with stuff that he should have never, ever been involved with. But I thought that was being a good dad, having him with me. So when I experienced heroin, I lost everything for my son. From the age of 5 years old to 17 years old, I don't have a picture with my son. There was no birthdays, no Christmases. There was none of that. When I got out of prison the first time, I left Ohio and came back to Indiana. When I did, I remember telling my mom that I was going to come back up here. And my mom telling me, like, don't do it. You're going to get in trouble in Indiana and they're going to give you life in prison. Well, I didn't listen. I wanted to come back up here. So I came back up here. I was released in October of 2014. By January of 2015, I was on a whole new dealing case on my way back to prison here in Indiana. But in that process, I got to smoking crystal meth. I'd never been around it before until I came up here. And I just got to smoking it and doing a lot of heroin. And I went completely into the streets. Like, I was just living a crazy life. And I was selling a lot of drugs, doing a lot of drugs, ripping a lot of people off, just living that life. And I went to prison. When I got to prison down here, I continued to do the same exact thing. The same exact way I lived on the streets, I was living in prison, getting in trouble. Well, they gave me a release date. I was going to be released a little bit early. So I remember leaving prison, and as I was leaving in the vehicle, I had a needle in my arm. Now, I knew I only had a couple hours before I had to report to my PO. In my mind, I would just tell my PO that I was dirty from being in prison. Well, I never made it to my PO. And I remember running into my dad a couple days later, and I had on a pair of gray sweats, a white T-shirt, and state slides, state issue clothes. And my dad asked me, he was like, man, what are you doing? I said, I'm doing what I know how to do, what I know what to do. And he was like, son, they're going to send you back to prison. I said, it don't matter. They only got a couple years they can send me back with. Because, see, that's the life I was living. I was good with the prison time. What I didn't know how to do was come to society, live a job, be a dad, be a son, be a brother, be a mentor. I didn't know how to live that way. In prison, all you have to do is take care of yourself and respect somebody, and you'll make it through there. That was it. I had somebody tell me when I can eat, when I can go outside, all that. I didn't have no responsibilities. So I continued to live that way. Well, they violated me, was sending me back to prison. I went on a run, and I was on the run for probably about 6 months. And I have to say that when I was on the run, God was doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. Because in this 6 months of being on the run, I overdosed probably 4 times. Yeah, it was probably about 4 times. I remember going home, and my dad worked for the city of Goshen. And he come to me and he was like, son, you got to turn yourself in. I said, look, I'm not doing that. I'm not turning myself in. It's not happening. He said, Bob, man, you're going to die. And I remember looking at my dad in his face, and I said, good. Hopefully I will. And the disappointment that was in his face, I didn't understand it then. Today I do. Living the life that I live today, I can understand 100%. I'm his son. He's my dad. And I couldn't imagine my son coming to me, telling me certain situations.
Right.
I just couldn't do that. Not today. So he come back home after this, and he was like, you know, they know you're at my house. I said, no, they don't. He's like, Bob, I work for the city. I said, okay. So he tells me he worked for the water treatment plant, that they could tell I was at his house because they knew it was just him that lived in this apartment. But when he was at work, see, my dad was the type of person, never used an alarm clock up at the same time every single day. Well, he would go to work at a certain time every single day. Well, his water would spike from like 10 in the morning until like noon. They knew I was there. So he come home, and I said, look, man, I told you I'm not turning myself in. I'm not doing this. At this point, I am really, really deep into the streets. And he says, listen, man, you have to do this. You can't be here. I said, all right, I'll leave. So I remember I left, and I went to South Bend, Indiana, to get some heroin. I go up to South Bend. I got some. But in the process, I bought this car for a half a gram of meth. Now, I don't even know if the car was stolen. I don't know anything about the car. It had one headlight, no tags, and one tail light. Well, I get this bright idea just to go to South Bend. So I go to South Bend. I meet up with somebody. I get some stuff. And I have a lot of meth with me. Probably a few pounds of meth in the car. I do a shot of heroin, and I knock it out on the side of the freeway. And I remember when I come back to, instead of driving off, I did it again. Well, this time, I knocked it out, and I come back to and realized where I was at. I was in front of the Elkhart County Jail. And I remember looking up, and I'm like, oh, man, you're tripping, Bob. What are you doing? So I go to drive off, and at this time, it started getting dark out. And like I said, I only had one headlight. And the headlight was pointing way up to the left in the sky, so it wasn't even going
Not
straight.
even a good one.
No, not at all, right?
Had.
So I pulled through this stop sign, the four-way stop there at the jail, and here comes this white SUV, and it was a Goshen cop. I looked over at him, he looked at me, and I just knew, like, oh, man, this is going to be bad. So he does a U-turn, turns his lights on, I floor the car. I take off. I go on a high-speed chase. I think I got like 3 or 4 cops chasing me, and I get away from them. I show up to my buddy's house, and I got to tell you that one of the craziest things about that night was I was driving down the street really, really fast, probably 90 mile an hour, and I don't know what this lady was she was in her yard watering her grass, and who waters the grass at like 8 o'clock at night, right? Well, I went through her yard and I almost hit her with this car. And that is something to this day that still haunts me because I've done a lot of bad stuff in my life. I've never, ever intentionally just hurt somebody like that. And this lady was minding her own business at her own house. And here I could have killed her. And I obviously didn't hit her, but I almost did. I drove through her yard. I get away. My buddy's in his front of his yard. I pull in. He's like, what's going on? And he sees all these cops. So I drive my car to the back behind his house. We get out, and he's like, oh, my goodness, man, what'd you do? And I'm like, man, it's cool. I can't leave right now. So we sat there. A couple hours go by, and I get a phone call, somebody wanting something, but it's only probably like $20. I get this bright idea that I'm going to go get this money. Now, everybody's telling me at this house, like, Bob, chill out, man. Don't leave. Stay here, dude. You're going to end up in jail. I'm already on the run. I got warrants. I know I'm going back to prison when I get caught. But to be honest with you, I was at that point in my life to where I didn't care if I lived or died. I just didn't have the guts in me to kill my own self. But if I could do it through a substance, it didn't bother me. So it's late, man. I would say it's probably almost 3 a.m. And I leave against everybody telling me to stay. And I drive to my dad's apartment. I remember going inside his apartment, and I have all this stuff in his house. And I'm in his bedroom, or in my bedroom, and I start separating everything out. I'm weighing up some stuff, and I shoot some heroin. I nod out. I pass out. I wake up to my dad beating on the door. And I'm starting to come to, and I open the door, and my dad is livid mad. Like, I thought he was really going to punch me. So I'm like, man, I better get out of here. He's going to call the cops on me. So got another bright idea. Instead of leaving, I shoot another bag of heroin, and I overdosed. The next time I wake up, I got 5 Goshen cops on top of me in my bed. They were Narcaning me. They handcuffed me and then Narcaned me. So anybody that's ever been Narcan, they know that when they come out of the thing, you're violent. You don't know what's going on. You're in an instant withdrawal. It's just, your mind is just completely blank. So I get up. I'm cuffed up. I'm looking around this room, and I'm like, man, where did all that stuff go? Well, my dad picked everything up for me. And this is a time where I was really like, boggled in my mind because I couldn't really understand what was going on. Well, everything was going on. And I hear my dad in his kitchen, and he said, don't hurt him. He said, man, he's a really good guy. He's strung out. He's on drugs. And he yells in, Bob, don't fight with him. I was known to make a cop chase me. I was probably known to fight with a cop. I was just ignorant in a lot of different ways. So there was nothing I could do. Like I said, I was handcuffed. We walk outside. I walk into my dad's living room. I've seen my dad cry probably 3 times my entire life. He's just not one of those guys. And I look over, and my dad was crying. And he said, son, please get some help. I said, it's all right, Pops, man. They're going to send me back to prison. He said, use this time wisely. I wasn't trying to hear that. I walk out. We get into this cop car. And this cop tells me, he gets in the car. And I said, what am I being arrested for? Well, in the state of Indiana, if you're on parole or probation and you get picked up on a violation, they read off your initial charge to you. So when they told me a dealing case, I said, oh, man, I'm never going to get out of here, man. My age, a whole nother dealing case. I'm already got a warrant for one of them. Well, it was my initial case. And he said, you know, you're a very lucky man. I said, how do you figure? I'm in a cop car going to jail. They're going to send me back to prison. He said, because you got a dad that loves you. It starts registering that my dad is the one that called the police on me. So when I get into the county, I remember going a couple weeks, didn't talk to my dad. I was very angry. I was bitter. My dad snitched on me, told on me, whatever you want to call it. I just didn't have nothing for him, right? So a buddy of mine came in, and just so happened it was the guy that I was going to meet that night. Well, this guy knew the relationship me and my dad had. We were really close. So he comes in, he's like, what's up, bub? How you doing? I'm like, man, cool. He's like, how's your dad doing? I said, man, F him. He said, what? I was like, man, he called the cops on me. And he was like, bub, you were dead in his house, man. What did you want him to do? He said, you got a son, man. He said, you wouldn't have called the cops or the ambulance for your son? That is the time that it hit me. I said, you know what, man, you're right. So I go immediately to the phone. I pick it up. I call collect, call home, my dad. My dad answers the phone. I said, you know, I'm sorry, man. I really am. I'm sorry. And he says, you know, Bob, I'm sorry too. He said, I'm sorry that I didn't do this sooner. And I said, all right. I said, you know, they're going to send me back to prison. And he said, they probably are. He said, and you need to. He says, you're going to die out here in the streets. So we talk a few times on the phone, and I've never been evaluated for house arrest or work release. Well, I find out I can go to house arrest and maybe not back to prison. So I'm calling my dad, and I'm trying to talk him into it. He's like, no way. He was like, no way. We're not doing that. I said, come on, Dad, please, man. So eventually my dad started telling me what I wanted to hear, but had no intentions on doing it, and I didn't know this. So I go into court, and I'm thinking that I'm going to get sent home on house arrest. It wasn't 30 seconds in the courtroom, the judge sends me back to DOC. And I'm like, wow, what? What I didn't know is my dad had conversated with the judge and more or less told the judge that you'd be burying his son if you'd done that to me. See, my dad really, truly wanted me to live my fullest potential in life. I never thought I had a potential in life other than being a drug dealer or a drug addict. I never knew how to be a dad. I never how to do any of this stuff. And this whole time, like I told you, I have a son. And I'm not involved in my son's life.
How old is he at this time?
My son at that time was probably 14, 15 years old. He's 23 now. And I remember, like, I would call every once in a while down to his mom's. He lives in Columbus, Ohio, and I would talk to him. But we just didn't have that bond, right? Like, he always wanted it, but I always chose drugs in the streets over my relationship with my son. So they sends me back to DOC, and I was gang affiliated. So when I got back down to Westville, I just continued to do everything, getting in trouble, write-ups, getting into fights, getting high. And they leveled me up and sent me from Westville to Michigan City behind the wall. And I got to tell you, when I hit Michigan City, it was a whole different level. Like, it was real. There was no more talking. Like, people was really losing their lives there. Like, if it was an argument, like, a person would assume just kill you other than argue with you and fight you. It was a whole different life. But there was more drugs inside that prison than there was out here on the streets. And that is the God's honest truth. When people tell you there's more drugs in prison, there really is. I mean, it is everywhere. So being in there, I continue to do stuff. And I got to tell you, like, I remember sitting on my rack one day in my cell, and I was like, man, there's got to be something different, right? Like, there has to be. Well, my dad had retired and went to Arkansas to live. And I remember telling my dad, like, you know, I'm never going to see you again. He was like, Bob, you have every opportunity to come down here when you get out of prison. But you have to change your life around to do this. And I said, you know, you keep saying, he would tell me, Bob, pray. I'm like, look, man, God can't do nothing for me, man. Because if he was, I wouldn't have been molested when I was a kid. I wouldn't have lived in foster care when I was a kid. I wouldn't have went through the things that I went through as a child that I went through that I felt like molded me to be the person that I was.
So if God was going to make a difference, he could have made it then.
Absolutely, right? That's the way I looked at things, right?
Gotcha.
And this whole time, my mom is my bestest friend in the whole wide world. Like, I am 100% mama's boy. I loved her more than anything in this world. And we were always really close. My mom was the one person that answered the phone for me every time I called from jail. She sent me money once a month. She was always my biggest supporter. And my mom was sick. She was really sick. She struggled for years. And she would always tell me, like, son, man, you don't get out of prison, stay out of prison. I'm going to die while you're in prison, and they're not going to allow you to come to my funeral. And I was like, look, man, you're not going to die. And I remember plenty of times laying on my bunk at night, Lord, please let me get up out of here and I'll change. I'll never get high. But every time I was released from prison, all those thoughts went away. I was right back to the same people doing the same exact things, selling drugs, getting high, robbing people, just being a really bad person. That's what I was comfortable with. So I get to Michigan City and I got in some stuff and I got stabbed 6 times. I remember going to chow that morning. I was in a cell house, cell 538. They called chow first thing in the morning. I come back from chow and I got up on the range and I was back by the back shower and I got into it with some guys and I ended up getting messed up pretty bad. I got stabbed like 6 times, got hit with a lot. I remember going back to my cell and I'm bleeding everywhere. And I had this thought in my mind, like, I want to call my son. I want to talk to my mom. When I came back from chow that morning, I'll back it up a little bit. When I came back from chow, I walked straight to the phone because I knew something was about to crack off. I picked the phone up and I called my mom. And it's probably 4:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. She answers. I say, Mom. She's like, yeah. I say, I just wanted to tell you that I love you. And she told me, she said, I love you too, son. She said, are you all right? I said, listen, I just want you to know if something happens to me that I love you. I always have, and I'm so grateful that you're my mom. And she said, son, are you all right? I said, I'm good, man. I just want you to know that I love you. And she said, I love you too, son. I said, I'm going to get off of here. She said, okay. We hang the phone up. I go upstairs. This is when it happens. I end up getting stabbed. I get into it with some guys. I remember sitting in my cell, and I remember calling home and talking to my son that morning. And the feeling that I got talking to him was crazy. Like, I just wanted to know if I was going to die, that I wanted to hear my mom, my son's voice. But when we hung the phone up, I remember sitting in my cell and saying, there has to be a different life than this right here. What can I do to change my life around? And the thoughts of, I don't know what to do. I got no education. I don't have anything. The time come for me to be released. My dad drove up from Arkansas to pick me up. In Michigan City, they release you at like midnight. So at 12:01, I walked outside the prison. I got to tell you, I've never in my entire life ever been so scared as when I walked outside that prison that morning at midnight. I was so scared that I was froze. I was scared of not knowing what to do. Like, I mean, I was terrified.
How to live otherwise.
Because the one thing that I knew was I didn't want to go to prison no more. I wasn't all the way sold on the fact of being sober the rest of my life. After doing this time in prison, I wanted to get out and sleep with as many girls as I could. I wanted to get messed up. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I would like to do.
That's all you knew to do, wasn't it?
It was. So my dad says, come on, son, let's go. We get in this truck and we start to pull out. My dad stops and he says, son, he said, there's 2 rules in my house. I said, what's that? Now, you got to remember, I just came from all these rules. I'm like, what's the rules? He said, you'll bring no drugs of any kind in my house. I said, okay. He said, and you'll go to church once on Wednesdays and twice on Sunday. I said, Pop, you can't make me go to church, bro. And he said, get out. He reached over and opened his truck door. I said, get out. He said, get out. He said, I've watched you for 20 plus years destroy you and your son's life. He said, your mama is sick, dying, and all she does is pray for you, not even her own self. He said, I can't do it. You died in my house, man. I won't do this no more. I'll wait for the phone call. Obviously, I didn't want to get out. So this was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself.
And that's that father's love with the prodigal son we read about in the scriptures, and your dad's love for you as a prodigal son to be able to say, no more.
And it's something that I really needed because my dad is in recovery today itself. He's over 30 years sober. My dad is a very judgmental person. He's the type of person that he got sober, and for him personally, he stepped away from it. He doesn't involve himself around people that drink or anything like that. He goes to church. He's a hunter. He hunts all the time. He's retired. But he has removed himself from certain situations. So when I got to Arkansas, it was right when I got released from prison was March 21st, 2020. My sober date is March 22nd, 2020. I came home so strung out on Suboxone that I will never in my life ever forget this sickness. And I believe that God gave me this so that way I can remember. Like, I really do. Like, I didn't have nobody to medically detox me off nothing. I was sick for 2 weeks. And it was, when they released me out of prison, I think I got out like a day or two before they shut the state of Indiana down. When we got to Arkansas, the whole state was shut down. We went to Hardy, Arkansas. And I remember going into his house, and I couldn't tell my dad that I was about to be dope sick off of Suboxone. Because he would have it just wouldn't have been a good idea. So I went 2 weeks sick, throwing up, using the bathroom nonstop. Like, it was miserable. And it was an adjustment for me because anywhere I went in my dad's house, he followed me. If I go to the bathroom, he's beating on the door. What are you doing in there? I'm like, man, I'm using the bathroom, man. Chill out. If I was, you got to remember, I was used to being locked down, so I have no problem with sitting by myself. There was plenty of times that I would go into my bedroom, shut the door, and just sit there by myself. I was comfortable with that. Well, my dad would always, come out here and sit with me, come out here, and it was a lot to adjust to. And I remember he come into the bathroom one day, and he's like, why you got your boxers on the shower? And I started laughing. I said, because I washed them. He said, there's a washing machine right there. In prison, you're going to take a shower with your boxers on, and then you wash those last while you're in there. So it was just an adjustment for me. So he took me to get a job. I found this place down here to work at. It was in a little town called Batesville, Arkansas. I'm working at this chicken place, and I wanted to buy a car. And this is what my dad kept telling me. He was like, son, do it the right way. I said, I'm doing it the right way. I have a job. And he said, you don't have your license. I said, I owe child support. I've never paid child support. I owe a lot of money in child support. He said, pray about it. I said, man, why do you keep telling me to do this praying thing, man? And he said, I'm telling you, son, pray about it. Well, I'm not lying to you. I'm 100% with you. Me and my dad prayed. He probably prayed a little bit harder than I did. The very next day, I woke up and I called child support. That's the same exact child support lady that I've always had on my case. So I'm talking to her, and she's like, I was wondering if I'd ever speak with you. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. I was like, listen, I messed up. I really did. I said, I'm not trying to dispute none of the money that I owe for my son to his mom. I want to pay it. But I don't have all this money to pay you at one time. I said, and I need my license to get a job so I can work, get a car. She said, I'll tell you what I'll do for you, Mr. Springer. I said, what's that? She was like, I'll release your license. I said, are you serious? She's like, absolutely. She said, you'll pay the reinstatement fee and you'll make a payment on your child support and I'll release it. I said, awesome. She said, but I'm going to tell you one thing. I said, what's that? She said, you miss a payment and I will take them again and you won't get them back. I said, yes, ma'am, I'll give you my word on it. So because I was doing the right thing, I had a job. I wasn't getting high. My dad was taking me to work. I was paying him gas money. I had the money in my bank account to pay the reinstatement. So I did it. My dad took me, got my license. I remember walking in, I took the test the first day and I failed it. And he's laughing at me. He's like, are you crapping me, man? We drove all the way up here and you failed it. I'm like, it's been a long time, Pops. So we go back home and I read this book, go back up there again. I take the test. I pass it to get my license. I remember walking out like, check it out, bro. I got a license. And he starts laughing. He's like, yeah, so do I. So I'm like, Dad, man, I was like, I want to get a car. He was like, all right. He was like, we'll get you one. So my uncle, he did me a big favor, man. My uncle bought this car for me and allowed me to pay him payments on it to pay it off. That was the first thing that I bought and paid off with legit money, like from actually working. And I had a nice little car. So I'm talking to my mom, telling my mom what's going on, man. Like, she's so happy for me, man. And I'm like, you know, I want to come back to Ohio. And she was like, nah, son, don't do that. She said, please don't do that. Stay where you're at with your dad. And I was like, man, I can't live with him, Mom. He's something else, man. She was like, just pray about it. And I'm like, why you guys keep telling me
Here
to
we
pray,
go
man?
again.
Yeah. So me and my mom were talking, man. We did it. I got it. I got my license. And I got my own place, living down there. And I'm not doing nothing in recovery yet. Well, my brother passed away a year out of prison, a little bit before a year out of prison. He died, and his funeral was actually on my birthday. And I had to come back to Indiana for his funeral. I remember going back to Indiana for the funeral, and I felt like using. I really did. I really, truly felt like using. I felt like getting high. But right before this, I'll back it up a little bit. Right before this, I'm working at this job. And you know, it doesn't take very long for a drug addict to walk into a factory and find out who's got drugs. I'm pretty good at it, actually. I'm pretty good at it. So we go in here, and I'm working. This guy comes up, and first 20 minutes, I find out he's got Suboxones. I buy 3 of them from him. I put them in a little Tylenol bottle. I remember going home that day. I go into my dad's bathroom. I popped the lid open. And I said, I'm only going to do a half of one. And I had this voice in my head that said, you're going to start this sickness all over again. That's how real the sickness was for me. So I didn't do it. I put the lid on it. I went out, talked to my dad for a little bit, went to bed. The next morning, I got up for work, done the same thing, go in the bathroom. I'm like, man, I'm going to do one of these pills, and it'll help me energize myself at work today. This little voice comes in my head. And people think I'm crazy when I tell this, but I'm telling you, this voice came in my head and said, you're going to start the sickness over with. So I didn't do it. I put the lid back on it. I get to work, and it's not the greatest day at work, but I got the solution in my pocket. So I go into the bathroom, I put this pill on a toilet paper dispenser, I go to crush it up and snort it. And this voice, you're going to start this sickness over. So I didn't do it. I listened. But I got to tell you, the third day I broke. The third morning I broke. I go into my dad's bathroom, and I took the lid off. I set the bottle on top of the sink. Now, in my dad's bathroom, he's got a washer and dryer like right behind him, behind the sink, the shower, the sink, and the toilet, and the washer and dryer. I don't know what I was thinking, but I turned the water on in the sink. Maybe so my dad couldn't hear me snorting the pill. I turned around. I looked back, and the bottle had fallen in the sink. I remember looking at this bottle, and I picked it up, and I turned it upside down. All 3 Suboxone tablets had dissolved that fast. That was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. One more time.
How many times has that happened
I know,
over the
right?
years? I'm sure you can't count them.
I can't, and this was a time in my life when I turned the bottle over, and I watched all the pour into the sink. I put the lid on it, and I started crying. I said, I'm a drug addict. I can't stop. I walked out of the bathroom that morning, go to work, and my dad was standing there. He said, what's wrong? I said, nothing, man. My dad hugged me, told me he loved me and he was proud of me. So I said, all right, man. I go to work. I come home, find out my brother's sick. He passed away in the hospital. Me and my dad come down here to Indiana. I really felt like using. I really did. I actually went with a friend of mine that night to his apartment, and I fell asleep on the chair. I woke up, and his cousin was sitting right beside me on a bed, smoking meth. I remember looking at him. I had my shoes, everything still on. I stood straight up, got in my car, and I left. And I told myself I'll never go back around there again. That's when I knew something was changing in me. I get back. I didn't have to openly tell my dad about it. We go back to Arkansas. And it became, I think the next event was, it was right time. It might have been like the 4th of July or something like that. This girl that I was working with wanted to hang out. Now, I told her I don't do drugs and I don't drink. She's like, all right, cool. So she picks me up. She drives a minute, too, to pick me up. I get in the car with her, and we're riding. And anywhere in Arkansas, it takes forever, it seems like, to get because there's nothing around. So we pull up to this like liquor store. And I said, what are you doing? She goes inside. She comes back out. She said, are you ready? I said, look, I need you to take me back home. She said, for what? What's wrong? I said, I told you I don't drink. She said, this isn't for you. It's for me. I said, yeah, but I'm cool. I don't want to. Because, see, I knew my dad's so judgmental that if I'd have called him and said, hey, Pops, this chick's drunk, he'd have been like, I told you not to go. Because he even told me I probably shouldn't go with her. So she took me back home. She was mad, man. I offered to give her gas money. She just drove off on me as soon as I got out of the car. She was mad. So I get in the house. My dad pulls up. He comes in. He said, what's going on? Why didn't you go? I said, well, I just knew he was going to dog me for this. And I said, Pop, man, she went to the liquor store, bro. And I didn't want to drink, man. I didn't want to go with her. So I had her bring me home. He said, man, I'm proud of you, Bob. He was like, do you want to go with me? And I was like, nah, Pop, I'm just going to sit here. So my dad leaves. I sat down on the chair. My Pops comes back 2 minutes later, comes walking in the house. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, if you're not going to go, I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay here with you. We spent that night not talking, watching some old Western on TV. But it was one of the best nights I ever had with him.
Let me ask you a question here. Believe it or not, we're near the end of our time here, Bob. Is your dad still living?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How old is he? Ballpark.
My dad is 68 years old, I believe.
Okay. Okay. If you could sit with him right now, what would you say to him?
That I love him. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being my dad. Thank you for never giving up on me when I needed it.
And, you know, he cut off all enabling, it sounds like, and started being the dad maybe you didn't want, but the dad you needed, and now you realize how much you wanted that, I'm going to guess. All right. Your mom, what if she was sitting here, what would you say?
Oh, man. My mom passed away in my arms. And, sorry, man.
Nah, that's all right.
I got to tell you, my mom was my best friend. When my mom died, I was in the house with her. I woke up. My wife woke me up. She said, please get up and talk to your mom. I got up and I seen her. I go outside and she's like, please go in there and pray with your mom and talk to her. I said, it's not going to help. I said, please. I go in there. My mom was a bigger lady. She was in the chair. I stepped behind her and I put my arms around her chest from behind. I had my left hand on her heart. I kissed my mom on the cheek and gave her a promise that I would stay sober and I would help everybody I can get sober. And as soon as I kissed her and told her I loved her, she died. That fast. To this day, I can describe in depth what her heart felt like in my hand. And that was a time that I hit the worst feeling in the world, but I didn't use. I made it through it. My mom is the one that named my platform Felonies to Recovery. My mom was one of my biggest supporters. And if my mom was sitting here right now, I would hug her and kiss her and tell her I love her so much, and not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. Not a minute, not an hour. And I actually told my mom coming in here when I was in the car earlier, I said, Mom, I'm about to go tell our story. Because my mom was there with me through it all. And my mom is my motivation to do the things I do with Felonies to Recovery.
You know what? Let's kind of cut it off there, and here's why. I want to invite you back. We need to hear the story of this point on. Once you start that recovery journey in your life and you're serious about it and about how it led to Felonies to Recovery, the good works that God's doing through that and through you. And we don't want to cut it short by squeezing it in. But whoa, the story you've just shared with us, the transparency, being so raw and surreal. Thank you. There's somebody out there who needs to hear that. I'm going to guess multiple somebodies, okay? Such, a struggle from within, but you're at the point of being the overcomer that Jesus says we are. He calls us conquerors instead of overcomers, except in some of the newer versions. But it's through him we're able to do that. And I'm sure that's where you're pointing the credit and the ability to do so. So, Bob, thank you. Thank you for this time. We're going to get you back to hear the rest of the story. God bless, and we want to remind you, as we try to remind our listeners with every episode, stay in the battle. Maybe it is one more prayer, just as they told you, keep praying, pray, and you got tired of it. Look where you're at today, and I'm sure prayer is an important part of your life now. So, folks, thanks for tuning in. God bless. We love you. Amen.
Amen.